You need to fly to Luxembourg, the woman said. Show them your mother's badge number. They'll know what to do. I remember thinking she had the wrong person. I was standing in the parking lot of a Kroger in Savannah, Georgia, still holding a bag of groceries my mother would never eat, and a woman I had never seen before was handing me a folded piece of paper like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. My mother had been buried 4 hours earlier. There was no reception afterward. No casseroles on the counter, no cousins filling up the living room. My aunt had flown in from Phoenix, stayed for the graveside service, and left before the dirt was settled. My brother Marcus drove down from Charlotte, stood beside me for 20 minutes, said she looked peaceful, and then mentioned twice that he needed to get back for a work thing. I drove home alone, remembered there was nothing in the refrigerator, and stopped at Kroger. That's where she found me. The woman. Early 60s maybe, gray blazer. The kind of posture that doesn't happen by accident. Your mother was Elena Voss, she said. Not a question. Yes, I told her. She served. I know, I said. What I meant was, I know the basic facts. My mother spent 22 years in the Army as a military intelligence officer. She retired as a lieutenant colonel. She moved us to Savannah when I was 12, bought a small house 2 blocks from a marsh, and worked afterward as a contractor for a firm that I was never able to find on Google. She didn't talk about her work. She didn't have plaques on the wall. She kept a neat house, drove a Civic, and made very good chicken soup from scratch every Sunday. She called me every Thursday at 7. She died of a stroke at 61, alone in her kitchen, and the neighbor's son noticed the lights on at 3 in the morning and called 911. I was 29 years old, and I thought I knew who she was. She didn't leave a will, the woman said. She did, actually. Filed with an attorney downtown. The house to me, her car to my brother, a modest savings account split evenly. Clean. Simple. She left other arrangements, the woman said, not in the will. She pressed the folded paper into my hand. It had a name on it, a bank, an address in Luxembourg City, and a phone number with a country code I didn't recognize. Call that number in the morning, she said. Tell them who you are. Then she walked to a gray sedan, got in, and pulled out of the parking lot without any hurry at all. I stood there with a bag of milk and cereal in one hand and a piece of paper I couldn't explain in the other. I sat in my car for a while without starting it. My mother had been a private person. That was just the word for her. Private. She didn't share things she didn't need to share. When I was a teenager, I used to find it frustrating. My friends' mothers gossiped and laughed and called each other by their first names. My mother was polite and measured, and I never once heard her raise her voice. She was warm in the way that a very steady thing is warm, like a stone that's been in the sun a long time. You don't notice it until you put your hand on it. I drove home and put the cereal away. I sat at the kitchen table she had given me when I moved into my apartment. A small oak table she'd had refinished, not new, not flashy. And I looked at the piece of paper for a long time. My brother called around 9. So, he said, the house goes to you. According to the will, yes. She never talked to me about that. There was something in his voice. Not exactly accusation. More like the first note of it. She had an attorney, Marcus. It was filed properly. I know. I'm just saying it would have been nice to be included in the conversation. I didn't answer that because I hadn't been included either. I had found out the same way he did, sitting in a lawyer's office 2 days after the hospital called me. But I didn't say so. There's not much else, I told him. Car, savings. It's all laid out. Right, he said. Okay. He was quiet for a moment. She never really opened up to you either, did she? He said. Not quite a question. No, I told him. Not really. He said goodnight. I sat with the paper again. I called the number the next morning. It rang twice. A man answered in English so precise it sounded practiced. I told him my name. I told him my mother's name. There was a pause, long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. Miss Voss, he said. We've been expecting your contact. Can you travel within the next 2 weeks? I asked what this was about. Your mother established an account structure here in 2009, he said. We are not able to discuss the contents by phone. You would need to come in person with your identification and documentation of her passing. I asked if he could give me any indication of what I would be walking into. Your mother was very thorough, he said. I think you will find it in order. That's all he said. In order. I went back to her house that afternoon. I had a key. I had always had a key, but I had used it maybe a dozen times in 7 years. She liked her space. I liked mine. We had a rhythm. Thursday calls, Sunday soup in the winter, a week in the summer when I would come stay, and we would walk the marsh trail in the mornings and watch true crime shows at night and eat too much takeout Thai. That was enough. It always felt like enough. Now I walked through her house looking for something I didn't have a name for. Her desk was in the second bedroom she used as an office. Everything was filed, labeled. Her tax returns went back 15 years in neat folders. Her insurance documents were paper-clipped and dated. The woman never let a thing get disorganized. I had always found this mildly annoying growing up. Now I found it quietly devastating. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, there was a manila envelope I had not seen before. Inside, a key on a small tag. The tag had 2 letters written in her handwriting. OUA. Luxembourg. I sat down on the floor of her office and stayed there for a while. Marcus texted at some point. Did you find anything else at the house? Let me know if I should come down. I put my phone in my pocket. That evening I booked a flight. I didn't tell my brother. I wasn't ready to explain something I didn't understand yet. I told him I was going to meet with her contractor firm to sort out some paperwork, which was vague enough to be believed and specific enough to not require follow-up. He texted back, "Makes sense. Let me know what they say. Also, have you thought about what you want to do with the house?" It had been 5 days since she died. I put my phone down and didn't answer. The morning before I left, Marcus called. He didn't mention the house right away. He asked how I was sleeping. He asked if I'd eaten. He was trying, I think. My brother is not a bad person. He and my mother never quite found their frequency after our parents divorced. He went with my father to Charlotte. I stayed with her. That distance calcified, not into hatred, just into something separate. But then he said, "I just want to make sure we're doing this fairly." Doing what fairly? I asked. Whatever she left, the house, any assets, I wasn't in the will for much. The will is the will, Marcus. I know. But sometimes there's more to it. Hidden accounts, that kind of thing. I asked him what made him say that. She was always so buttoned up about money, he said. And she lived small. For someone with her career, she lived really small. I always wondered. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. That part was still true enough. I flew to Luxembourg on a Tuesday. I had never been. I didn't know what I expected. Something glamorous, maybe, or something austere and gray. It was neither. It was a small country that seemed very comfortable with what it was. Stone streets, tidy parks, a train station that smelled like coffee. The bank was in the financial district, on a street lined with buildings that all seemed to be competing for who could appear most unassuming. Inside, everything was quiet in a way that felt intentional. I gave my name at the desk. Within 3 minutes, a woman in a dark blazer appeared and led me to a private room off the main corridor. Warm light. 2 chairs. A low table. A folder already sitting on it. She offered me water. She said she was sorry for my loss. She said she was sorry for my loss. She said my mother had been a valued client since 2009. I asked her to explain what I was looking at. She opened the folder carefully. My mother had established a discretionary trust. The account had been funded over 16 years through regular deposits. Some large, some small, but always consistent. The investments had been conservative and had compounded steadily. The trust had a designated purpose, a specific class of beneficiaries, and a named successor trustee, me. The number at the bottom of the summary page made my hands go still. $9.4 million. I said I thought there was a mistake. She said there was not. I asked her what the trust was for. She set the summary aside and lifted a second document. A formal purpose statement written in my mother's language, short sentences, plain words, no decoration. The trust was established to support the families of intelligence officers killed or permanently disabled in the line of duty. People whose deaths or injuries were not publicly acknowledged. People whose families received no ceremony, no folded flag, no official explanation. Just a phone call, and then silence, and then they were expected to carry on. My mother had known several of them. She had watched their spouses try to make sense of a loss that had no paperwork attached to it. She had started small, a tuition payment here, a medical bill there, nothing traceable back to her. Then she had formalized it. A trust, properly constructed, quietly maintained, designed to outlast her. The woman across the table folded her hands. She did not want recognition, she said. She told us once that visibility was a liability in her work, and she saw no reason that should change in her personal life. I thought of every Thursday call, every Sunday walk, every time she changed the subject when I asked about her work in a way that was so smooth I never noticed she'd done it. I had spent 29 years thinking she was private. Turned out private was doing a lot of work. There was a letter. Of course there was a letter. The woman slid it across the table in a plain envelope, my name on the front in my mother's handwriting. My phone buzzed. Marcus. I set it face down. The letter was 1 page. 2 paragraphs. If you were reading this, I didn't get to explain it in person. I would have preferred to. I kept this from you not because I didn't trust you, but because once you know the weight of a thing, you carry it whether you want to or not. I wanted you to have more time before the weight arrived. She went on to describe the first family she had helped. A woman in Virginia whose husband had died in a circumstance that was listed officially as a training accident. 2 children. A mortgage. A stack of forms from the VA that never quite resolved into real support. My mother had found out through someone who knew someone. She had sent money anonymously, twice, before she decided that anonymous wasn't sustainable. She needed a structure, something that would keep moving even if she couldn't. You don't do this for credit, she wrote. You do it because you saw something, and you could not unsee it. I saw those families. I could not unsee them. The second paragraph was shorter. You are steadier than you think you are. That's all I'll say. The rest is yours to figure out. I folded the letter and put it in my coat pocket. The woman returned. She walked me through the mechanics. The current beneficiaries, 12 families, anonymized in the documents she showed me but real, addressed, receiving quarterly disbursements. Medical costs, housing assistance, 1 college fund, 2 counseling stipends for children who had lost a parent to a job that officially never happened. You assume full oversight now, she told me. Disbursements continue automatically unless you make changes. Any significant structural decision requires your written authorization. And if I dissolve the trust, I asked, what then? It is legally within your authority, she said. The funds would become a personal asset, subject to international tax considerations, but yours. $9.4 million. 12 families who didn't know my name. A dead woman's handwriting in my coat pocket. I asked for a day to think. My hotel room was small and clean and looked out over the old city. I ordered room service and didn't eat much of it. I called no one. I sat at the desk and read the letter again 3 more times. Marcus called at 9 in the evening his time. I answered. How was the meeting, he said. I told him there was more to it than I expected. A pause. How much more? Nother. Pause. Longer. Okay, he said slowly. But if there are assets that weren't disclosed in the will, they weren't in the will, Marcus. That doesn't automatically mean she structured this deliberately. It's not ours to divide. He was quiet for a moment. What is it exactly? He asked. I told him it was a trust, that it had a purpose, that I was named as trustee. A trust for what? For the people she felt responsible for. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. She always had to be responsible for everyone. That landed in a way I didn't expect, because he wasn't entirely wrong. My mother did carry things. She just never told you she was carrying them. There's money for us, he asked. There's a family stabilization provision, I told him. She thought ahead. If there was genuine financial need, it could be addressed, structured, accountable. So there is money. Not a blank check, I said. He was quiet again. I'll call an attorney, he said. I figured you might. He did. I was served with a formal inquiry 6 days after I returned to Savannah, a demand for full disclosure of any assets connected to Elena Voss that were not included in the probated will. My brother had found a probate attorney in Henrico County who was willing to argue that a trust established by a Virginia resident could carry domestic obligations regardless of its foreign domicile. I hired an attorney of my own. A woman in Savannah named Patricia Okafor, 40 years in estate law, ran her own firm. The kind of person who was never in a hurry because she had seen every version of this before. She read the documents I brought her and was quiet for a long time. Your mother's attorneys did this correctly, she said. The structure is tight. Will it hold? I asked. Yes, she said, but that doesn't mean it won't cost you time. The first hearing was in a courthouse in Richmond, neutral ground Marcus's attorney had requested. I flew up on a Wednesday morning. I had not spoken to my brother since the night I told him there was a trust. He texted twice, once to tell me he wasn't trying to make this adversarial, once to ask if I'd thought about the house. I answered neither. The courtroom was ordinary, the kind of room where ordinary people have extraordinary bad days. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a judge who had clearly heard 40 variations of this particular argument. Marcus sat at the opposite table. He looked tired. He had always been the louder of us. Bigger personality, more friends, the kind of person who filled a room without trying. That day he looked like a smaller version of himself. His attorney argued that a trust established by a Virginia resident should be subject to Virginia intestate considerations if it was not properly disclosed. Patricia responded without raising her voice. The trust predated any claim by 16 years. It was properly registered in Luxembourg, referenced an addendum to the estate filing, and funded with assets that had never been subject to joint ownership. There was no basis for a domestic challenge. The judge asked several questions, requested documentation, scheduled a follow-up. Outside the courtroom, Marcus walked toward me. You could end this, he said. So could you, I said. He looked at his shoes. Do you know how much she spent on me over the years? Nothing, Lee. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, a check for $200 when I graduated college. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. My mother had been closer to me. Geography, partly. Temperament, partly. She and Marcus had never recovered from the divorce in the way that people sometimes can, given enough time and enough effort. They hadn't put in the effort. Neither of them. She didn't leave you nothing, I said. She left you what she could. She left you $9 million. She left me the responsibility for $9 million, I said. That's not the same thing. He looked at me for a long moment. You always sounded like her, he said, and then he walked to his car. The second hearing brought more documentation. Luxembourg certification, 16 years of investment statements, a summary of disbursements, anonymized, demonstrating consistent purpose. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Marcus's attorney tried a new angle, argued that I had been unduly influenced, that my mother had favored me in ways that shaped my willingness to serve as trustee against the family's interests. Patricia stood. The trust was established in 2009, she said. Miss Voss was 22 years old. She had no role in its creation. She was named as successor trustee in an amendment filed in 2021 without her knowledge. I hadn't known about the 2021 amendment. I found that out in the courtroom. The judge called a recess. When she came back, she ruled. The trust was valid. The challenge was dismissed. The language was measured and procedural, and it landed like something settling into the floor. Marcus did not look at me when it was over. I drove to his hotel. He was in the parking lot, sitting in his rental car. I knocked on the window. He rolled it down. I'm not going to keep fighting you, he said. Good, I told him. I never understood her. What she was doing, where her head was. Neither did I said. Not entirely, he rubbed his face. $9.4 million, Lee. And she drove a Civic. She drove a Civic because the car wasn't the point, I said. He was quiet for a moment. She was proud of you, he said. That was always obvious. I don't know if that's true, I said. But she trusted me. And that's what I'm trying to live up to. He nodded slowly. Not agreement, acknowledgement. I told him about the family provision, the structured support clause, financial counseling, a defined annual allocation tied to demonstrated accountability, no lump sum. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was offering or lecturing. Both, I told him. A little of both. Dad's way, he said. Mom's way, I said. He almost smiled. Yeah, okay. It wasn't resolution. It was the beginning of something that might eventually become resolution, which is a different thing and takes longer. I flew back to Savannah and went to her house. I sat at the desk in her office for a long time. I looked at the filing cabinet, the labeled folders, the key hanging on its hook by the door that I had never noticed until I went looking. I thought about how many things I had never noticed. In the back of her desk drawer, the last one I checked, because that's how these things go, there was a photograph, my mother in her 30s, in civilian clothes, standing with 3 other people outside a building I didn't recognize. All of them were squinting into the sun. All of them were smiling. On the back, in her handwriting, Ramsden, 1998. Found it. Found what? I don't know. I may never know. But she looked happy in a way I had not often seen her, uncalculated, off-duty. I kept that photograph. I spent the next year learning what it meant to be a trustee. The Swiss contacts transferred the administrative files to a secure system I could access with credentials the Luxembourg bank mailed to me. Every quarter I reviewed the disbursements. A widow in Fort Bragg whose husband had died in a context that the Army listed as undisclosed. 2 kids in Maryland, college fund accumulating slowly. A man in Colorado with a spinal injury from a deployment that officially never happened, receiving monthly physical therapy payments that his insurance would not cover and his benefits did not reach. My mother had known each of these situations. She had vetted them personally. Her notes were meticulous and compassionate, and she had never asked for acknowledgement from anyone. I did not tell people about the trust. There was nothing to tell. I lived in the same apartment, drove the same car, went to work at the design firm where I had spent the last 4 years. I reviewed disbursements on Saturday mornings with coffee. It took about an hour, sometimes less. Marcus and I started talking again, slowly, imperfectly, like people who are relearning a language they let get rusty. He began the financial counseling. He was not graceful about it at first. He texted me after the first session, "This is humiliating." I texted back, "I know." "Keep going." He did. A year after the court dismissed his claim, he drove down to Savannah on a Saturday. We walked the marsh trail near my mother's house in the morning. The air smelled like salt and something green. Neither of us spoke much. At one point he stopped. "I keep waiting to feel like I got cheated," he said. "And?" "I don't." "Exactly. I think I feel like I missed something." He looked out over the water. "Like there was a whole part of her I never got to know." "There was a whole part of her I never got to know either," I told him. "I just got to find out it existed." We walked for a while longer. He picked up a rock and threw it into the marsh. "Watch the ripples go out." "She never made noise about anything," he said. "No," I said. "She didn't. You're the same way." I didn't know if that was a compliment or an observation. Maybe both. When I got home that afternoon, I sat at the oak table she had given me, and I read her letter again. The last 2 sentences of it, which I had memorized by now but kept reading anyway. "You are steadier than you think you are." That's all I'll say. The rest is yours to figure out. I thought about the 12 families, about the woman in Fort Bragg who did not know my mother's name, about the man in Colorado who had never heard of Elena Voss, about the 2 kids in Maryland who would show up at a college one day and never know who made a portion of it possible. My mother had spent 22 years in a job that required her to be invisible. She had retired and chosen invisibility anyway, not because it was required anymore, but because it was right, because she had seen what happened when recognition didn't come and she had decided not to wait for it to matter. She had been 36 when she opened that account. I was 29 when I found out it existed. She had been building something for 30 years longer than I had been looking for it. I keep Thursday evenings clear now. Old habit. The call that doesn't come anymore. Sometimes I sit with my coffee at 7 and think about what she would have said. She never talked much on the calls. She listened. She asked one or two specific questions and remembered the answers the next week. She was interested in a way that was quiet and consistent and felt, at the time, like not very much. I understand now that it was everything. The trust will continue well past my lifetime if I don't touch the principal. The Luxembourg firm has succession protocols. There are legal safeguards and layers of review. My mother designed it to run on its own. She knew that people get tired, get distracted, lose their way. She built something that could survive that. I think about her most on mornings when I walk the marsh trail by her house. I bought the house. It made sense. It was mine anyway. But more than that, I wanted somewhere that still smelled like her good sense. Her discipline, her Civic in the driveway, and her coffee at 6, and her filing system that will outlast us both. She didn't leave loudly. She didn't want to. But what she left is still moving out there in the world, quietly, without press releases, without a name attached. A woman in North Carolina whose son graduated last spring. A widow in Texas who kept her house. A man in Colorado who can walk without pain most days now. My mother saw them. She could not unsee them, so she did something about it for as long as she was able, and then she arranged for it to keep going. I used to think quiet meant empty. I know better now. If you have someone in your life like that, someone who does without telling, who builds without announcing, who shows up Thursday after Thursday without making it a performance, I hope you have time left to tell them you see it. And if you don't have time, if you're reading this from the other side of a loss that doesn't have a name yet, I want you to know, what she built is still standing. What he built is still standing. The steady things are the ones that last. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since Luxembourg, not in a dramatic way, just the quiet, persistent way it works. How every decision a person makes sends something forward in time, and most of the time they never see where it lands. My mother made a decision in 2009. She was 36 years old. She had seen something she couldn't unsee. Families left behind by a system that needed them to disappear quietly. And instead of looking away, she opened an account. She did it without telling anyone. She funded it consistently for 16 years. She never asked for acknowledgement. She never told me. And because of that long, unbroken chain of choices, a woman in North Carolina was able to send her son to college. A man in Colorado can walk most days without pain. A widow in Texas still has her house. My mother did not do those things, but she set them in motion. That's how it works. What you do or don't do keeps moving after you stop. Marcus didn't understand that at first. He heard $9.4 million, and the chain of cause and effect in his mind was simple and immediate. There is money. It should be divided. I should have some. That's a human response. I don't hold it against him. But what he missed, what took him a year to start to see, was that the money was already doing something. It had a direction. Interrupting it wouldn't have divided wealth. It would have ended a current that my mother spent half her adult life building. I think about the version of myself who almost dissolved the trust. She existed. She was sitting in a hotel room in Luxembourg City with room service going cold, and a phone buzzing with Marcus's name and a number on a piece of paper that could have become something much simpler. That version of me would have been richer and lighter, and I think I would have spent the rest of my life knowing I had chosen the easier thing at the exact moment it mattered. Courage isn't always loud. That's what I kept coming back to, over and over, in the months after the court dismissed Marcus's claim. My mother had been courageous in a way I never registered when she was alive. The courage of consistency, of doing something difficult quietly and without credit for 16 years, of trusting that the work was enough even if no one ever connected it back to her name. That is a harder kind of bravery than most people attempt. It requires you to care about the outcome without needing to be part of it. What I know now is that character is not what you show people. It's what you do when no one is looking and no one will ever know. My mother knew that. She built her whole life around it. The Civic, the marsh walks, the Thursday calls, none of it was small. It was all the same thing, expressed in different forms. She had decided what kind of person she was going to be, and then she just kept being that person, day after day, year after year, without announcement. Marcus is steadier now. Not perfect, neither am I. But we're in contact, which is more than we were a year ago. He sent me a text last month that said simply, "She was something else." I wrote back, "Yeah, that was enough." I keep the photograph of her at Ramstein on my desk. She's squinting into the sun and smiling in that unguarded way I rarely saw in person. I don't know what they found that day, but she looks like someone who is exactly where she's supposed to be. I try to remember that when the trust decisions feel heavy, that she figured out where she was supposed to be and went there steadily for 30 years. That's the only instruction she left me that really matters. Not the legal documents, not the disbursement schedule, not the succession protocols. Just that. Find the thing that deserves your steadiness. Then don't stop.